You join me in Tokyo with Yoichi Funabashi, outgoing editor of the Asahi Shimbum and one of Japan's leading foreign policy experts. We're here to discuss the rise of China, and particularly China's evolving foreign policy. Yoichi, last year, China and Japan squabbled very badly over the Senkaku Islands, known as the Diaoyu in China. You called this a shock comparable with the Nixon shock of 1971, when the US re-established relations with China behind Japan's back. Why was last year such a seminal moment?
Well, first of all, from a Japanese point of view, the way that China acted and behaved was very much shocking, ruthless. We certainly have known that the Chinese very much critical on the Japanese on history issues, but we never have known the Chinese being so much ruthless on this. Another one is in 1971, when we were exposed to Nixon shocks, Japan was on the rise. But Japan has been in decline, and people has felt very much vulnerable. And then China is, on the contrary, on the rise. So I think that's another reason why Japanese people are so shaken. And I think that they basically have regarded China's treatment of this as a sort of diplomatic shock and awe.
What did China do that was so shocking?
Well, this is not only about the China's intrusion into the Japanese waters, but also China actually de facto banned its export of rare earths to Japan as a sort of perceived punishment. So it's not only the maritime issues, but it encompasses much more, very other fields too.
Now, Deng Xiaoping advised China to hide its light and to rise peacefully and, in a sense, quietly. That policy appears to be coming to an end. Why? And what kind of foreign policy do you see replacing?
I don't know. I don't think that Chinese has found the answer yet. It appears to be no longer, they appear to be no longer satisfied with that Deng Xiaoping's low-profile policy, peaceful rise strategy. But at the same time, they appear unable to find a new road of mission to replace that.
The international system has served China very well. In a sense, it's kind of ridden on the free market, the Bretton Woods arrangements, etc. Why is China now beginning to rock the boat, or why, in your view, is it beginning to rock the boat?
I think perhaps they seem to be more confident of their economic wealth and their development, and now replacing Japan as a #2 world economy. So that may be one factor. Another reason that perhaps that they feel more vulnerable in terms of resources, maritime safety, as well as perhaps the North Korean issues. So they perhaps tend to overreact to defend their interests.
Do you think that the long-term strategy of Beijing is to squeeze the US out of the Pacific, or at least to limit its role in the Pacific, which after all, since the war, has been very big, very important, all-embracing?
I think there may be some degrees of different views among the Chinese players. But basically, I think that China still knows they can coexist with the United States, particularly in the field of the economy and trade. Both economies can exist, and can exist perhaps even better in the future. But on the realm of the security issues, I think that if China feels vulnerable on the maritime issues and then being driven to develop that, the naval power, projecting the naval power, blue ocean naval power, then it could really be in conflict of that existing international order which the United States has laid the ground.
Could there be a change in military posture by other Asian nations in the region? Could there be a response, in other words, or an arms race of some sort?
We have seen already an arms races, particularly naval arms races, in the past 10 years or so, and it's likely to continue that. So I think that it could be extremely dangerous if we would just let this rule of the jungle to continue. I think that we really, at one point, we really have to conceive and devise some way of maintaining that maritime security among nations, and particularly, I think that the U.S., Japan, and China, three countries have a very much serious, big responsibility to do that.
Can we talk a little bit more about China's growing economic weight and how that might also play into its foreign policy? For example, you mentioned the unofficial ban on rare earth exports that China imposed after the Senkaku shock, the Senkaku dispute. Do you see China using its growing economic muscle to project a kind of a foreign policy or foreign power within the region?
I personally hope that China will not exert the newly acquired economic power to extract the diplomatic concessions from the other countries, as they seemed to do that last year in a rare earth case. But perhaps China, after all, is becoming to be a more normal country, and any big economic players are all tempted to use that economic power to gain some diplomatic points, and you just cannot rule out the possibility. You cannot expect China should remain to be an exception.
Just on the renminbi, I mean, how has Japan reacted to China's, albeit early stage, efforts to internationalize the renminbi?
I think that it should be a welcome move if the Chinese government really will decide to internationalize the renminbi, because it requires more transparency of the market, more integrity and neutrality of the market, and that will help the other countries too, because the risk of the China risk emanates from that murkiness of how that their currency, the value of the currency is decided. If it's more transparent, if it's more based by the market mechanism, I think it's all welcome.
To some extent, what we're seeing, is it not natural? I mean, China is a great civilization. It's well on the way to becoming a quote-unquote great power. Is it not natural that it begins to exert itself, that it begins to project more in the region?
Well, it's only natural. That is not designed to, driven to upset the existing order. But on the question of Japan-China relationship, it has been a long, long history, more than 2,000 years. And, throughout the history, it has been always very difficult to manage. For instance, in the early 7th century, Japanese emperor sent an envoy to China, Sui dynasty, and carrying a letter which says that king of that land where the sun rises, send greetings to the king of the land where that it sets. Okay, that court officials of the China actually consider that kind of style of address improper. Since that time, this diplomatic role, diplomatic form has continued the problems throughout the history. So it's very difficult if China regards itself as a middle kingdom. Yes. Not only Japan, but the other countries too.
I mean, just finally, I mean, China's sun is now clearly rising. Japan's is perhaps in slight decline, but it's still fairly high in the sky. I guess my question is, China and Japan have never been strong at the same time. Can they coexist peacefully?
Well, I think we can coexist. But at the same time, I think that the China-US relationship also should coexist. And I think that those relationships among three and are very much, I think, entwined. So Japan and China can not alone determine their relationship as if they were able to do that in vacuum. It inevitably that the role of the United States in the future, the role of India will come into play here.